Welcome to my channel, folks. I'm Nancy Thompson, your storyteller of American folklore, mysteries, and all kinds of thrilling tales. Join me for today's story, straight from the heart of history. Back in the days of colonial America, a small county was established in Virginia. There was a little town called Willow Creek. It was a bustling place, kissed by the winds of prosperity, home to many wise and learned folks. The 18 scenic views of Willow Creek, beloved by the poet Marcus Oakley, were right here. A modest stream ran through the town, flowing in from the northwest, winding through the valley, trickling over shallow banks, and meandering southwest of the settlement. It carved out a deep hollow, later dubbed Carp Pond by the townsfolk. They say Carp Pond holds a beautiful legend. Back in the day, there was a young scholar named Thomas Kinney. One night, while reciting poetry under the moonlight nearby, a golden carp leaped out of the water and turned into a stunning young woman. She joined Thomas in his poetry, and the two slowly fell for each other. Years later, after topping his exams at the Colonial Academy, he returned home, named the stream Carp Pond, and built a house by its edge. He settled there for good. Folks say Thomas Kinney Sr. lived in Willow Creek. His descendants, the brothers Thomas Jr. and Samuel Kinney, were the offspring of that very scholar from years past. Times had changed, though. The family's former glory had faded. By this generation, with their parents gone too soon, the two brothers relied on each other. Everything depended on the older brother, Thomas Jr., heading into the hills to chop wood for a living. Thomas Jr. was now past 30. He'd endured his share of hardship, working steady as a rock. But every penny he earned went to his younger brother's schooling. Even now, he hadn't married or started a family. Samuel Kinney, on the other hand, was a natural-born genius, always earning praise from his teachers. He was the brightest hope of the Kinney line, the one to carry the family forward. So, Thomas Jr. pinned all his dreams on him. When Samuel was little, he didn't mind much. But as he grew older, he saw his brother's good intentions. So he mustered up the courage to say, "Hey Tom, I don't want to study anymore." Thomas Jr. didn't let him finish. "Stop right there," he cut in sharp. "As long as I'm around, you're hitting those books, kid. No ifs, ands, or buts. If you let me down, how are we gonna face Ma and Pa up in heaven?" Samuel shot back, "You want me to study? Fine, but you gotta get me a sister-in-law first. No wife for you, no books for me." The brothers locked eyes, Samuel's tone leaving no room for debate. Thomas Jr. was stuck. To coax his little brother back to school, he reluctantly nodded. "All right, you got it. I'll find you a sister-in-law, don't you worry." The next day, Thomas Jr. went to the local matchmaker to find himself a bride. But the girls from nearby towns all turned their noses up at his rundown shack. No one wanted to tie the knot and scrape by in poverty. Thomas trudged home, his face heavy with disappointment. As he passed by Carp Pond, a woman's cry for help pierced the air. Thomas Jr. bolted toward the sound, his boots pounding the dirt. Peering over the edge of Carp Pond, he spotted a woman's head bobbing above the water, her body sinking fast, arms and legs thrashing in a desperate struggle. Without a second thought, he dove into the chilly stream, swam to her side, and hauled her up onto the bank. The woman must have swallowed a few gulps of water. She was choking and out cold. Thomas pressed on her stomach, working until she coughed up the water from her lungs. When she finally came to, she blinked up at a stranger hovering over her, and flushed red with embarrassment. "Hey miss, don't get the wrong idea," Thomas said quick, trying to clear the air. "I know you're the one who saved me," she replied. "I owe you my thanks." She struggled to her feet after speaking, but her legs gave out, and she stumbled backward. Thomas caught her and helped her to his house, then fetched the town doctor to check her over. The doc patched her up with some old-fashioned remedies, a few stitches and a dose of medicine, and soon she was stirring again. Thomas brought a bowl of broth from the kitchen, rushing in to stop her from getting up too soon. "Easy now," he said, "your body's weak. Rest up in bed a bit longer and drink this." She took the broth, sipped it down, and murmured, "Kind sir. My name's Willow. I came from out west, Kentucky way. Looking for kin. Didn't expect." Her voice broke, and tears spilled down her cheeks. It turned out her full name was Willow Reed. Back home, a flood had wrecked everything. Crops drowned, fields ruined. Her folks starved themselves to save her, passing away one after the other. Before her pa died, he'd told her about an uncle in Willow Creek who'd struck it rich trading goods. Years back, her family had pooled their savings and sent it with him to start a business. But they hadn't heard a peep since. Now, with disaster hitting Kentucky, Willow trekked to Virginia to find him. After a long, hard journey, she tracked down her uncle's place, only to find he'd made it big, and didn't want anything to do with his poor kin. He had his hired hands run her off. Lost in a strange town with no one to turn to, Willow felt hope slip away. Passing by Carp Pond, she'd slipped and fallen in. Her swimming skills no match for the current, and cried for help just as Thomas happened by. That's how her life got saved. As they talked, Samuel Kinney strolled in from school, spotting a stranger in the house. He raised an eyebrow and asked, "Tom, who's this?" "Oh, Sam, perfect timing," Thomas grinned. "Let me fill you in." He recounted the day's rescue, and Samuel listened, wide-eyed. Then he turned to the woman and said, "Miss Willow, if you don't mind our humble setup, why not marry my brother? He'd treat you right, I swear." Willow blushed hard at the suggestion, not answering right away, just sneaking a glance at Thomas. Samuel, seeing his brother freeze up like a log, nudged him, "Come on, Tom, step up. She's not put off by our patched-up roof. She'd make a great sister-in-law. Wouldn't that be something?" Thomas fumbled, tongue-tied, until Willow spoke first. "If Thomas doesn't mind me being an orphan with nothing, I'd be honored to be his wife, and take good care of him." With Samuel playing matchmaker, the deal was sealed. No big ceremony, mind you. Just the brothers and old man Liam Smith, a respected elder in town, standing witness to their vows. After Thomas tied the knot, Samuel kept his word and hit the books hard, gearing up for the big exams in Philadelphia 2 years out. Time flew by, and soon he was ready to head north. Before he left, Thomas pulled some coins from his pocket and pressed them into Samuel's hand. "Kid, it's a long road ahead," he said. "Take this, it's all I got to give." Samuel started to wave it off, but Willow chimed in, "You know your brother's stubborn as a mule. Take it, you'll need it on the way." With his sister-in-law backing it up, Samuel pocketed the money, said his goodbyes to the pair, and set off from Willow Creek to the big city. He traveled light, picking wild berries when the trail got rough, sleeping in roadside chapels when he could, until Philadelphia loomed on the horizon. His wallet was down to a few cents, too little to spend, since he'd need it for the exam fees. Blowing it now would mean missing his shot. Just as Samuel reached the outskirts of Lancaster, he caught sight of something grim. A woman lay crumpled on the ground, beaten unconscious, while a group of rough-looking men hoisted her onto a wagon. Samuel froze, heart pounding. If he followed them, he might miss his chance at the exams. But if he walked away, could he live with letting her suffer? He wavered for a moment, then steeled himself. "A man's gotta do what's right," he muttered. "Books teach justice. How can I claim it if I turn a blind eye now?" With that, he decided to trail the wagon, figuring he'd scope things out first. Lucky for him, the wagon rattled along slow, and Samuel kept pace unnoticed. After a while, it pulled up outside a rundown barn. The men glanced around, then hauled the woman inside. Samuel didn't dare barge in. Instead, he circled the place, spotting a gap under the wall where the dogs slipped through. He waited till nightfall, then crawled through the hole on his belly. Inside, a lantern flickered in the main room. He crept closer, ears straining to catch their words. "Boss, we've got Miss Warren tied up tight," one said. "She ain't going nowhere, let's rest up." "Better not mess this up," another growled. "This is Judge Warren's daughter. Old man Tate's paying big for her. Samuel listened hard, piecing it together. These weren't just thugs, they were hired kidnappers. They'd nabbed Miss Warren to blackmail her father, Judge Warren, the head examiner for the Philadelphia exams. After some back and forth, they settled on a plan. 3 of them would take shifts keeping watch. Samuel bided his time till the dead of night. When one guard started snoring, he slipped into the room where they held her, whispering, "Miss Warren, don't scream. I'm here to get you out." She flinched, startled. But he quickly added, "I'm no friend of theirs, I swear." Suspicious but desperate, she nodded as he untied her ropes. No time to waste. He led her back to the dog hole and hissed, "We're crawling out. Go." Miss Warren hesitated. Crawling through muck wasn't exactly her style. But shouts from the barn lit a fire under her. "Better dirty than dead," Samuel urged. She gritted her teeth and slid through. Samuel right behind her. The kidnappers' yells erupted. "They're gone. After em." And boots thundered after them. The pair sprinted into the woods, thorns snagging their clothes. The gang hot on their heels. Just when it looked bleak, a patrol of constables marched into view. "Help! Save me!" Miss Warren shouted. The lead officer, Captain Miles, recognized her instantly. He worked for her father. He sent half his men to chase the thugs, and escorted her back to town himself. Samuel trailing along. Judge Warren was over the moon when he heard Samuel had saved his daughter, Abigail. He invited the young man to supper at their grand home. Over roast and potatoes. The judge spilled the whole ugly story. A rich merchant named Tate, whose son Henry had his eye on Abigail, was behind the kidnapping. Abigail, a book-smart gal, had sworn she'd only marry a top scholar. Henry Tate, no genius himself, couldn't hope to win the exams fair and square. So Tate hired those goons to nab her, figuring he'd strong-arm the judge into rigging the results. "It's a disgrace," Samuel fumed. "Exams are about merit, not money." Judge Warren nodded, but sighed. "Tate's got pull, his sister's married to a senator. Who's tight with the governor? Cross him, and I'm in hot water." Samuel didn't know much about politics, but he met the judge's gaze and said, "Sir, if there's anything I can do, I'll give it my all." Judge Warren smiled faintly, then laid out his idea. "The governor's been crowing lately about honoring the exam's top scorer himself. He'll even throw a wedding if the winner's got a sweetheart. Maybe one of his nieces or a bigwig's daughter. If you take first place, Samuel, I'd be proud to see Abigail wed to you." Samuel blinked, stunned. "I'll aim for the top, sir," he said. "But a wedding's gotta be mutual. Miss Abigail's a fine lady. I'd be lucky to have her, if she's willing." The judge chuckled. "I know my girl's heart. You saved her life. She's smitten already. Just don't flop the exam, or this chance slips away." "Don't worry, Judge," Samuel said, a spark of confidence glinting in his eyes. "I've been burning the midnight oil for 10 years. It's not just about a title. I want to serve this country right." Judge Warren saw the grit in him. A kid from nothing with a fire inside. He slipped Samuel a few more coins, saying, "You saved my Abigail. This is my thanks. Pay me back when you're on your feet, if you feel like it." Samuel couldn't say no to that kindness. He took the money, found a cheap inn near the exam hall, and buckled down to study. Time flew, and soon the big day arrived. Samuel strode into the testing room, head high, and poured his heart onto the page. Ideas for fair laws and better towns, all straight from his hard-earned wisdom. While the examiners graded the papers, Judge Warren kept inviting Samuel over, letting him and Abigail get closer. One evening, as they shared a meal, a servant burst in, grinning ear to ear. "Mr. Kinney, you did it. Top of the list, number 1.
Hot yang."
Judge Warren clapped his hands. "When the governor calls you to the State House, that wedding's as good as done." Sure enough, a fancy carriage rolled up soon after. sent by the governor to fetch Samuel for his reward. He stepped into the grand hall, nerves jangling, and faced not just the governor and Judge Warren, but a woman staring daggers at him. Samuel remembered the judge's warning. Tate's sister was the senator's wife, a power player with the governor's ear. She must have heard about the kidnapping flop. Trouble was brewing, he could feel it. Samuel figured Mrs. Tate might try to trip him up, while the governor handed out the honors. But she stayed quiet as he left the hall. Just as he reached the gates, a young lady in fine silks stopped him. "The senator's wife requests your presence," she said. Samuel recognized her. She'd been hovering near Mrs. Tate during the ceremony. No dodging this one. He followed her to a lavish parlor, where Mrs. Tate dismissed her attendants and fixed him with a cold stare. "Mr. Kinney, champion of the exams," she said. "No need for formalities. You know why you're here." "Ma'am, I reckon I don't," Samuel replied, keeping his head low. "Please enlighten me." She smirked. "You've guessed who I am, I'm sure. I'll cut to it. My brother's boy fancies Abigail Warren. Step aside, let him have her. And I'll see the governor throws you a wedding. With someone even finer." "With all due respect, ma'am," Samuel said, "the governor's already promised me a match. I can't go against his word." Mrs. Tate's face tightened, anger flaring, but she swallowed her next words, eyes sharp as a hawk's. Samuel left her parlor, sweat soaking his shirt. He'd thought winning the exams would let him do good, help folks. But stepping into this world showed him how tangled power could get. Behind him, Henry Tate stormed out from a side room, fuming to his aunt. "You're letting him walk away? After he stole Abigail from me? Who said I'm done with him?" Mrs. Tate snapped. "He's the golden boy right now. And Judge Warren's got the governor's trust. Move too fast, and we're the ones burned." "What then?" Henry whined. "We just watch him marry her." Mrs. Tate slapped him hard across the cheek. "Useless boy. Over a girl, you'd throw away everything? When I climb higher, say, to the governor's mansion, you'll be untouchable. What woman won't fall at your feet then?" Henry's eyes widened. "Uncle to the governor," he grinned, rubbing his face. "Sorry, Aunt, I panicked. What's the plan?" "Relax," she said, voice icy. "What the Tates want, no one takes. We'll bide our time." A few days later, Judge Warren got Samuel appointed as Willow Creek's magistrate, with Abigail promised as his bride. The families picked a date. The Harvest Moon Festival. Word spread fast.
Samuel Kinney, exemption.
Now magistrate of Willow Creek, blessed by the governor himself, back in town. Folks lined the streets to cheer him home. Thomas Jr. and Willow beamed whitest of all. Neighbors from miles around came to celebrate, some just to cozy up to the new big shot. Samuel rode in on horseback, a red sash pinned to his chest, waving to the crowd with a humble smile. This was his birthplace, where he'd grown up tough and lean. Now, as their magistrate, he swore to make life better. Peace and plenty for all. "Tom." "Willow," he called. Spotting his brother and sister-in-law, he hopped off his horse, and Thomas rushed over, wrapping him in a bear hug. Words failed him. Years of sacrifice poured out in that embrace. Samuel threw himself into his magistrate work, clearing old cases stacked up for years, and tackling floods that plagued the county. The folks of Willow Creek adored him for it. Harvest Moon crept up fast, and one night, after wrapping up late at the office, Samuel headed home to plan the big day with Thomas and Willow. As he reached the house, he noticed a light flickering in his old room. Curious, he pushed the door open and froze. A sweet scent hit him first. Then his eyes caught Willow soaking in a wooden tub, steam curling around her, veiling her form in the dim glow. "Oh, Sam," she yelped, scrambling to cover up. Samuel slammed his eyes shut, face burning. "Willow, I didn't mean sorry." "What's going on?" Thomas's voice boomed, rushing in at the commotion. Seeing Samuel, he broke into a grin. Well, look who's back. Perfect timing, come on in. Tom, wait, Samuel stammered, glancing at Willow, who was red as a beet. She whispered, Sam, it's not what you think. Your brother meant this. She pointed to a table nearby, and Samuel followed her gaze. Puzzled but intrigued. There sat a pile of shimmering pearls, clear as glass and glowing soft in the lamplight. Tom, where'd these come from? Samuel asked, suddenly wary. Were folks bribing his brother now that he was magistrate? No need to fret, Sam, Thomas said, clapping his shoulder. Willow made these. After you stopped those floods. She saw how worn out you were, and crafted them to cheer you up. Samuel blinked, confused, then turned to Willow. Her shape shimmered, and in a flash, she transformed into a golden mermaid, scales glinting like the pearls. Turns out, Willow wasn't human at all. She was a golden carp from Carp Pond, one that had gained magic over the years. Long ago, a carp spirit met and loved a scholar in Willow Creek. Willow was her kin, carrying that same spark. Willow had always lived in the pond, dreaming of greater things. Old tales in her clan said, leaping the dragon gate upriver would turn her into a skybound river spirit. So she'd snuck out with the elders, swam hard, but her magic wasn't strong enough. She failed the leap, crashing back wounded, nearly stranded on the bank. That's when young Thomas and Samuel, playing by the river, found her. Tom, this little goldfish is still kicking, 4-year-old Samuel had said. Barely, Thomas replied, grim. She's drying out. Let's save her. Samuel urged. They scooped her up and returned her to Carp Pond, leaving her fate to chance. You're that fish? Samuel asked now, jaw-dropping. Willow nodded. I made it past the gate later, she said. Now I'm a river spirit. But that day you boys saved me. I faked drowning years back. To meet you again. A way to repay you. She paused. A day up, there's a year down here. I've got 3 days left. Before I ascend for good. The old magistrate squandered flood funds. So I'm sticking around. To fix things for you, Sam. Thomas added, she's been crafting those pearls. Wearing herself thin. Samuel saw it now. Willow looked frail. Her glow dimming. Take these, she said, handing him a golden pearl. For your wedding tomorrow. A gift from me and Tom. Samuel tried to refuse. But Thomas insisted, take it, or she'll be upset. We're family. We share the good and the bad. Tears stung Samuel's eyes as he accepted it. The next day. Harvest moon shining bright. He was set to wed Abigail. But a rider galloped up, panicked. Sir, bandits hit the wedding party on the road. Your bride's in trouble. Samuel grabbed his pistol and a posse of deputies, racing to the scene. When he arrived, the escort lay dead, and Abigail clung to life, blood staining her dress. Abigail, hang on, I'll get a doctor, he cried, cradling her. Samuel, not bandits. Tate, she gasped, then went still. Samuel wailed, grief tearing through him, until Willow appeared, urgent. Find water, quick. I can save her. Hope flared. He carried Abigail to the creek nearby, lowering her into the shallows. Willow leaped in after, and the water froze solid. Impossible in late summer heat. Folks watching gaped as ice cracked, then melted, a spout shooting skyward. Willow rose, holding Abigail, and set her on the bank. She'll wake soon, Willow whispered, handing her to Samuel. Sure enough, Abigail stirred. Samuel. I'm alive. Willow saved you, he said, turning to thank her, only to see mist pouring from her fading form. What's happening? Samuel asked, voice trembling. Your sister-in-law used her river spirit essence to save Abigail, Thomas said, stepping up behind him. She gave up everything. The crowd murmured. They'd suspected Willow's sacrifice was coming. All for Samuel and the town. Thomas hadn't stopped her. Why Willow? Samuel choked out. You and Tom gave me this life, she smiled weakly. I married him. Now I've saved you. My debt's paid.
No regrets.
No, we owe you, Samuel protested. I'm leaving now, she said. Promise me you'll look after Tom. He's a good man. He's given so much for you for us. We will, Samuel vowed, kneeling with Abigail to bow in respect. When they looked up, Willow was gone. Abigail, revived, pointed the finger at Tate's hired thugs. Samuel tracked them down, followed the trail, and hauled Henry Tate and his father before the law. 2 years later, his flood fixes and fair rulings earned him a promotion, a post in Philadelphia, teaming up with Judge Warren, now a state official, and the governor's wife. He dug up dirt on Mrs. Tate's schemes. The governor, furious at the truth, stripped her of influence, banishing her to obscurity. The Tate family's reign of terror crumbled for good. That spring, Samuel, Abigail, and Thomas visited Carp Pond to mourn. Look, Abigail said, nodding at a woman washing clothes by the water. She's the spitting image of Willow. Thomas ran to her, shouting, "Darling!" And her face, turning, was indeed Willow's, reborn. That's the end of our first yarn, folks, Nancy Thompson said. Now, I'll spin you another. Stick around. You've been hooked since the start, I bet. Next up's a frontier tale. The man who sheltered a nun, who snuck in and left a rosary. Late in the pioneer days, out in Clearwater, Oregon, 2 siblings leaned on each other tight. Out in Clearwater, Oregon, lived a brother and sister, Jacob and Lily Summers. They'd been born to wealth. Their folks ran a thriving trading post. But a wildfire roared through one night, burning their fortune to ash. Their parents shielded them from the flames, saving their lives at the cost of their own. Jacob, still a kid, took on raising Lily. They holed up in a crumbling barn outside town, surviving on what Jacob could beg off the streets. He gave Lily every scrap of food he scrounged, leaving himself rail-thin and hollow-eyed. Pitying them, townsfolk chipped in coins to build the pair a couple of shacks, a roof to keep out the rain at last. Jacob learned to fish under the locals' guidance, ditching begging for a rod and line. Years rolled by, and the siblings grew up. Jacob fished the river daily, while Lily stayed home, sewing and mending to pitch in. Their hard work paid off. Not riches, but enough to get by. They were content, even at the bottom rung of Clearwater. Now in his 20s, Jacob still hadn't found a wife. Friends tried setting him up, but the girls around town scoffed at his patched clothes and empty pockets. Lily, though, bloomed into a beauty. Suitors lined up for miles. She hadn't met her match yet, holding out for something real. One day, Jacob came home before noon, rod slung over his shoulder. Lily raised an eyebrow. "Back early, Jake?" "Yeah," he sighed. "Bill Tanner cornered me again about you. Says he's crazy for you, Lil. He's a decent guy, got a steady job. You'd be set marrying him." Lily groaned, cutting him off. "No way, Jake. I'm not hitching up. Unless you find me a sister-in-law first." Jacob chuckled ruefully. "With my luck, Lil, I'll be a bachelor forever. If you're not into it, forget I said anything." He grabbed his gear and headed back to the river, leaving her shaking her head. At the water's edge, Jacob noticed a crowd downstream, buzzing with excitement. "Hey, come look," someone hollered. Tom Riley hooked a weird fish. Never seen anything like it. Jacob wandered over, curiosity piqued. When he saw it, his gut twisted. The fish gleamed gold, 6 long tendrils trailing from its sides, and 2 tiny legs sprouted from its head. A memory flickered. An old trapper's tale about a river guardian. "Tom," Jacob said urgent, "you ought to let that go. Look at it. It's got a dragon's mark. Mess with it, and we're asking for trouble." The crowd roared with laughter, Tom grinning widest. "Jealous, Jake? If I cut it loose, you dive in to snag it yourself. I ain't that dumb." Jacob pressed, undeterred. What are you planning with it, Tom? Sell it, course, Tom shot back. This is a gift from the wild. No way I'm passing it up. $10, and it's yours. Jacob frowned. $10 was a fortune he didn't have. Looks half dead already, he said. 10 steep, I've got $1. Take it or leave it. Tom hesitated, knowing deep down the fish had just washed up. Not some grand catch. A buck was better than nothing if it croaked. Fine, Jake, he relented, playing it generous. Since you're such a softy, I'll let it go for $1. The crowd smirked at Tom's backpedaling, but Jacob didn't care. He ran home, grabbed the cash, and bought the strange fish. Its golden scales dull but still alive. Jacob carried it to a quiet bend in the river, away from prying eyes. Get outta here, he muttered, slipping it back into the water. Don't show your face again. I ain't got more to bail you out next time. The fish twitched, then swam off slow, vanishing into the depths. Jacob watched it go, hoping he dodged whatever curse it might have carried. A few days later, he and Lily sat in their yard, patching up fishing nets. A stranger stepped through the gate. A woman, striking and unfamiliar. Jacob stared, caught off guard by her beauty, momentarily lost in her presence. She spoke first, breaking the spell. Sir, I haven't eaten in days. Could you spare a meal? Jacob snapped out of it. Come on in, miss, he said quick. I'll fix you something. Her face lit up, and she followed him inside. He whipped up a simple spread. Fish, cornbread, whatever they had. And she dug in without a fuss, devouring it like she'd been starving. When she finished, she dropped to her knees before Jacob, startling him. Whoa, miss, what's this? He said, pulling her up. It's just food. No need for that. Where are you from? How'd you end up like this? Tears welled in her eyes as she answered. My name's May Carter. My folks died in a wagon crash out east. I got sent to my aunt's place. But she couldn't stand me. Pawned me off to marry some old rancher with a limp. I slipped away when she wasn't looking. Jacob and Lily exchanged a glance, their hearts going out to her. May, Lily said soft. Where are you gonna run to alone? Stay with us. No one'll bother you here. May looked to Jacob, hesitant. He nodded firm. Stick around, May. You're safe with us, I promise. Relief washed over her, and she settled in, grateful for a roof and kind faces. As winter rolled in, May turned their shacks into a home, scrubbing floors, mending walls, cooking meals that warmed the soul. Jacob and Lily couldn't stop praising her. Days stretched into weeks, and Jacob found himself smitten, though he kept it quiet. His rough life made him doubt she'd ever look twice at him. Lily, sharp as ever, caught the way he stared. One day, she cornered May. What do you think of Jake? May smiled shy. He's got a big heart. Honest, steady. A rare kind of man. Lily's eyes sparkled. Well, why not marry him then? We'd be family for real. May blushed deep. I don't know if he'd want me, she murmured. Lily grinned wide. He's been sweet on you forever. Just too chicken to say it. I checked with you first. Get ready to be my sister-in-law. With Lily playing Cupid, May and Jacob tied the knot. No fuss, just love. They were thick as thieves after that. Stuck to each other like glue. Lily watched them, half jealous, half thrilled. One morning, she heard a seamstress shop in town was hiring. Eager for work, she headed out. But as she passed the market, a gang of burly men blocked her path, their grins cold and mean. Lily stepped back, wary. Who are you? What do you want? One smirked. Don't spook, missy. Our boss's son fancies you. We're just here to fetch you for a chat. Tell your boss's kid I ain't interested, she snapped, turning to bolt. The man's face darkened. The young master's set on you. That's your luck. Grab her. They lunged, snatching Lily up as she fought. Townsfolk nearby froze. These were hands of the Vance family. Clearwater's big shots. Young Vance was a spoiled bully, and no one dared cross him. But Tom Riley, in the crowd, saw it all and ran to warn Jacob. Tom burst into the shack, breathless. "Jake!" They nabbed Lily. Vance's men took her. Jacob's blood boiled. Lily was his world. No way he'd let some rich punk ruin her. He didn't waste a word. Just grabbed a hatchet from the woodpile and stormed off toward the Vance estate. May, wide-eyed with worry, ran after him, her skirts kicking up dust. They reached the big house fast, its iron gates looming. Jacob charged the entrance, but 2 guards stepped up, blocking his path. He swung the hatchet wild. They ducked and scrambled inside, yelling for backup. Inside, young Vance, Caleb Vance, the family's golden boy, was looming over Lily, her dress torn at the shoulder. He grinned, ready to pounce, when the door slammed open. A guard stumbled in, panicked. "Boss, trouble. Harkin's here. He's busting through the yard." Caleb's face twisted with fury. He'd been interrupted mid-hunt, and it killed his mood. "Get that fool," he barked. "I want to see what he's got." Soon, Jacob stormed into view, hatchet gleaming. Seeing Lily roughed up, he roared and lunged at Caleb. Vance's men piled on, and in no time, Jacob hit the floor, pinned and battered. Caleb smirked at Jacob, helpless. "Should have stayed home, dirtbag." But then May stepped forward, voice steady as steel. "Let them go, or your fancy house pays the price." Caleb laughed, loud and cruel. "You? A penniless nobody? Talk big all you want. Stick around, maybe I'll keep you too." His taunts lit a fuse in May. She flicked her wrist, and a force like a gale hit the room. Vance's men flew back, crashing into walls. Another gesture, and Jacob and Lily were free, staggering to her side. May pointed at Caleb. He screamed once, then crumpled, out cold. The Vance crew stared, too spooked to move, and let the trio walk out. Jacob, still reeling, turned to May. "Where'd that come from?" She sighed. "No point hiding it now. I'm the river guardian. That goldfish you saved. I nearly died failing my trial years back, till you set me free. After I healed, I took human shape to repay you." Jacob and Lily gaped, stunned. Their wife and sister-in-law, a spirit from the tales? Seeing Jacob's silence, May faltered. "If you can't stand me not being human, I'll leave." "No way," Jacob said fierce. "You're my wife. Don't care what you are. We're sticking together." May smiled, relieved. But trouble wasn't done. Back at the Vance estate, Caleb woke to grim news. The doc checked him over. Whatever May did, it had wrecked his chances of ever having kids. He sobbed to his father. "Pa, they ruined me. I can't live like this. Kill that woman." Old man Vance burned with rage. But he wasn't rash. A woman that strong could outmatch his whole crew. He stewed, unsure, till a scruffy preacher knocked on his door, claiming he could fix it. "How?" Vance demanded. "She's tough," the preacher grinned. "But grab her, man. And she's ours. I'll handle the rest." Vance lit up, ordering his men to tail Jacob. One day, fishing alone, Jacob didn't see them coming. A blow to the head, and he was out, dragged back to the estate. They sent May a note. "Come to Vance's if you want him alive." She'd thought her last showdown scared them off, but this lit her fury anew. She marched to the house, where the preacher waited. Jacob bound at his feet. "Well, well, monster," he sneered. "Been watching you. Finally got you now." May's heart sank. This wasn't some holy man. He reeked of dark tricks. With Jacob in his grip, she couldn't strike. "Let him go," she warned, "or you're all done." The preacher laughed. "A beast with feelings. Coo. Hand over your spirit core, and you both walk." May's face hardened. Her core was her power, her life. He'd use it for evil. But as he smirked, she saw her chance. She waved a hand, blasting everyone but him and Jacob aside. He snarled, "Fine, play tough," and muttered a curse. Jacob writhed, blood spilling from his mouth. "Stop." May cried. "You want the core? Take it." She forced it out, a snowy orb, and collapsed, trembling, as it floated to the preacher's hand. He cackled, "With this, I'm unstoppable," then vanished into the night. May stumbled to Jacob, freed him from his ropes, and they fled the Vance estate. The stunned guards too rattled to follow. Back home, May's strength faded fast. Scales crept over her skin. Without her core, she couldn't hold her human shape. "Jacob," she whispered, "I'm out of power. Soon I'll be a fish again. We weren't meant to last. Take care of yourself." Jacob clutched her, tears streaming. "Don't matter what you turn into. I'm with you forever. We ain't splitting up." As he spoke, May's body gave out, morphing into a massive golden fish. He grabbed a barrel, filled it with water, and set her inside, vowing, "You're staying right here. I'll look after you." Lily watched, heart heavy. Her brother's devotion was unshakable, and May's sacrifice had saved her life. It was a bittersweet trade, tragedy laced with luck. Days later, a traveling nun knocked on their door, asking for food. Jacob welcomed her in, noting the late hour. "Sky's dark, ma'am," he said. "Rest here tonight. Head out tomorrow." The nun nodded, grateful, and they fed her a simple meal. Night fell, and while Jacob and Lily slept, a figure slipped into Jacob's room. The nun, pausing by the barrel. She peered at the golden fish, murmuring, "So that's how it is. All right, I'll lend a hand." She unhooked a rosary from her neck, wooden beads worn smooth, and dropped it into the water. Then she slipped out, quiet as a shadow. A month passed. Jacob trudged home from fishing, pole over his shoulder, when he saw a woman by the shack, a face he dreamed of every night. His hands shook. "May," he croaked. She turned, smiling. "It's me, Jacob. I'm back. And this time, we're never parting." They fell into each other's arms, sobbing with joy. May explained later, "The nun's rosary woke my spirit. I rebuilt myself. Human now, no magic left. Just a regular gal." Jacob didn't care. She was his May. And that was enough. They started a small trading post, scraping by at first, but it grew steady. May bore him 2 kids, and the family thrived, happy in their hard-won peace. That's the tale, folks, Nancy Thompson wrapped up. If you liked it, drop a comment below. Subscribe, share. Thanks for listening. See you next time.